Market. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Richard Hipkins. Chris, that's the second. I apologise to me. I don't know where that came from. Chris.
What's all the fuss about? I thought I'd go back to the purpose of the Act that we're repealing here today and talk a little bit about that. The purpose of the Act, it states, the purpose of this part is to reduce the impact of fossil-fuelled thermal electricity generation on climate change by creating a preference for renewable electricity generation through the implementation of a 10-year restriction on new baseload fossil-fuelled thermal electricity generation capacity, except where an exemption is appropriate, for example, to ensure security of supply. So let's just run through that for a moment, and let's just consider some of those things. To reduce the impact of climate change, well, surely I think the members on this side think that that's a good idea, reducing the impact of climate change. We've always believed that in human-induced climate change, we don't take the balanced approach of the National Party, which is to believe that it's a hoax one day and then believe in it the next day and then come back and repeal all of the climate change legislation. It's a balanced approach on the same day, in fact. They take a balanced approach on the same day, changing their mind as they're going along. So it creates a different day. That's right, different day. Mr. Brownlee says it's a different day, different position. Right. So this bill creates a preference for renewable electricity generation. Now, I'm staggered as to know what the problem with that is. What's the problem with creating a preference for renewable electricity generation? Surely that's something that we must agree on. A preference for renewable electricity generation. What on earth is wrong with that? But the Minister doesn't seem to be all that interested in engaging in this kind of discussion or argument. Now, it also puts in a restriction on base-load fossil-fuelled thermal electricity generation. Now, this is base-load fossil fuel. It's saying that our core energy supply, as we're expanding our core energy supply, this is not the peak stuff. This is not the stuff that we only need in times of really, really high demand. This is the stuff that basically adds to the base load. It's saying that that shouldn't come from thermal electricity, except where it's needed to secure supply. Now, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Doesn't seem to be anything wrong with that. But no, the government's going to railroad this through without allowing the members of the public to have any say on it. I want to take up two other points that Mr. Auchenville raised in his speech. He said, first of all, that thermal generation was expensive and there was going to be no clamour to build more thermal generation. He said it was going to be expensive. And it was a very interesting point, because then he went on to say that the removal of this restriction will lower power prices. Now, with that kind of logic, I'm staggered he's not in the new National Cabinet. I'm absolutely staggered. Didn't Max Bradford? That's right, Max Bradford said a very similar thing, didn't he? He said that these reforms were going to lower the power prices for consumers. And did they result in lower power prices for consumers? Did they result in lower power prices for consumers? No, they did not. They did not. Not in any way. But so here we are, once again, another day and another bill from this government denying that climate change is a reality. They're denying that climate change is a reality. It'll all be okay if we just stick our head in the sand for a little bit more. Everything will be fine. Ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is bliss. The government has failed to answer some of the most basic questions. Do they actually believe in human-induced climate change? Because anybody listening to this will be totally confused about what the government's position is. And do they support renewable energy or not? They do. But for the second bill in a row, they're doing away with provisions in the legislation that support renewable. It's so wrong. That's right, Mr. Brownlee, it is so wrong. So why are you doing it? If it's so wrong, why are you doing it? Renewable energy is integral to New Zealand's future. It's part of our international reputation as a clean, green country. It's something that we're all proud of when we go overseas. We come from a clean, green country where most of our electricity is produced from renewable sources. That's something I was incredibly proud of when I went around the world. So how on earth can New Zealanders be proud of their country, but out on the world about our clean, green status, when the government back home is doing away with all of the legislation that was put in place to really enhance that? Our international delegations overseas, when they go off to these climate change conferences, they're not up the front anymore saying all the wonderful things that New Zealand's doing. They're down the back, hiding behind the sign, hoping that no one will notice them, because they are so embarrassed to be representing New Zealand and to be representing this government. And the international community has noticed. Haven't they noticed? Because what did Gordon Brown do? What did Gordon Brown do on John Key's very first visit to the UK? Well, on his very first visit to the UK, he introduced a departure charge on flights coming to New Zealand. So John Key popped in to visit, and up up pops this departure charge that will penalise and punish the New Zealand tourism industry. It will have a major impact on the Kiwi economy, a major impact on our own airline, of course, that we own, thanks to this good Labour Party here. And so that was John Key's reward. I bet there are a lot of businesses in New Zealand hoping that John Key stays home a little bit more. Because if that's the kind of response that we get when John Key goes off overseas, I think they'll be hoping he stays home a little bit more, don't you? I don't think we need any more of that. Now, if we'd been in the government and Helen Clark had been the Prime Minister, she could have gone to the UK and had sat down with Gordon Brown and talked about all the wonderful things that we're doing and put forward a very compelling case for that charge not to be raised. But can John Key do that? Can John Key do that? No, he can't, because he'd stand there and say, well, we're not really sure about this climate change thing. We're going to repeal all of the legislation that was put in place by the last government to deal with it, but we don't want you to put this tax on us. And who on earth is going to take any notice of that? Perhaps he'd be better off staying at home and coming to grips with the real issues here. Perhaps Mr. Key and his government would be better off letting the public of New Zealand have a say on this bill rather than trying to ram it through under parliamentary urgency. It's not going to a select committee. No, apparently it's not going to a select committee. Another one. I know. How many is that? How many is that we've been dealing with in this house? That would make all of them. I think that would make all of the bills. This government has not passed a single bill through a select committee. Not one single bill through a select committee. So what have we had? We've had the 90-day fire at will, and there was there was an inadequate regulatory impact statement on that. So the ACT Party doing very well. There was an education bill that said it was unnecessary in the regulatory impact statement. There was a biofuels bill with no regulatory impact statement. And now we've got this bill with no regulatory impact statement. So we're really, really good with our regulatory responsibility. I think they've got a Minister of Regulatory Responsibility. He's doing pretty well so far, isn't he? We should all... Where is he? But he's doing a very good job so far. He's doing a very good job so far. Now, obviously, the public of New Zealand haven't had a chance to have a say on this bill. So I thought maybe we should give voice to some of the people who have concerns about that. Well, let's give voice to some of the people who have concerns, because they're not going to get to come to this Parliament and have a say on this legislation, such as the Environment and Conservation Organisations, the ECO, who said it's a surprise that the national government is putting the ETS on hold when it claimed it was their idea to have an emissions trading scheme in the first place and that they take climate change seriously. Well, I think that was before the election, though, wasn't it? That was one of the things that they said before the election, before they became the government. They've changed their mind now. So ECO go on to say New Zealand has had reviews nearly every year on climate change policy from 1992 to 1997 until the emissions trading scheme was decided on. The emissions trading scheme, combined with the moratorium on large new thermal generation, would have for the first time placed a price on carbon and have provided investors in cleaner technology with some degree of certainty. Because I thought the National Party were in favour of certainty for business. I thought, in theory, that's another one of the things that they say before the election. That's right, they say it before the election. It all sounds very good before the election, but it's not so good once they get into government. It's very inconvenient, isn't it? Very inconvenient. Very inconvenient. So what about the Blue Greens? Whatever happened to the Blue Greens? Whatever happened to the Blue Greens? They had some views on this. I'm sure they had some views on this. In fact, they got Greenpeace to come along and speak to their conference on it. They got Greenpeace to come. The Blue Greens, they had Greenpeace to come along. The Blue? Oh, they've disappeared. They've disappeared. But what did Greenpeace tell them? What did Greenpeace tell them? Greenpeace said, the fact is the ETS will not be enough in itself to prevent inappropriate thermal projects, at least in the medium term, so we need a disincentive of the renewables preference to prevent new emitting investment from being locked in. And that was at the Blue Greens conference. But that's another thing. That's right, the Blue Greens conference, that was before the election. I forgot. How foolish of me to forget. That was one of those things that you say before the election, and then you become the government and you just do whatever you like, and you don't have to worry about those pesky members of the public anymore, because you can just ram it through under urgency without having to worry about any of that public consultation stuff. That's not so important to this government. They really don't mind about that. That's right, that's the Tolley principle. That's the Tolley principle. And so, Mr. Speaker, this bill won't lower power prices, regardless of the government's rhetoric on the issue. It will result in increased reliance on thermal power that will push up power prices, because as Mr. Ogenvold did say, thermal power is expensive. Thermal power is expensive. So let's be honest about it. This bill will result in higher power prices because the era of cheap, non-renewable energy sources is gone. The era of cheap, non-renewable energy sources is gone. And And that's right, it's been a great couple of weeks from the planet, hasn't it, from this government here? The climate change deniers on the opposite side of the House. And that's why they're trying to ram this through under urgency, and why they don't want the public to have a say, because then the public would know. The public would know that they really don't care about New Zealand's clean green image. They really don't care about renewable energy. They don't care about the state of the planet.
I regret to advise the member that his time has expired.